oh no, I've booked with the worst cruise line, what have I done, what a mistake. That is complete codswallop. If you're not from the UK, the word codswallop just means a load of rubbish. Today, the best and the worst cruise lines were revealed, and I have to say, I've cruised on the best and I've cruised on the worst, and I completely disagree. The survey was conducted by a company which are called Which. They're a company here in the UK and they review things. They're very good generally. I've used them before for loads of things. I think when I bought my house, I used their mortgage guides quite a lot. So they are generally a good company, which is why I'm so shocked by this outcome and this survey. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So what they did in the survey is they surveyed over 2,000 passengers and they came to the conclusion that cruise lines like Silversea and Saga and Viking were the best, and they came to the conclusion that cruise lines like Royal Caribbean, Norwegian and MSC are the worst. They surveyed people in I think 11 different categories, but one thing that they massively forgot to take into consideration is the fact that the cruise line which is best is at least 4 or 5 times more expensive than the cruise line that is the worst. I've cruised with Viking, who came first in this survey thing, and they are fantastic. If you ever get the chance to cruise with Viking, definitely do it. It is brilliant, but it's very, very, very much a premium and luxurious product. A cruise on Viking is probably going to cost you £400–500 per night. It does include loads, but you're paying loads at the beginning. Comparing that to MSC, MSC are very much a budget, family, fun, cheap cruise line. You can cruise on MSC for as little as £50 per night. I've done that before. I would say it's like comparing apples to oranges, but I don't even think that they're both fruit. I feel like it's comparing a piece of toast to an apple. They are completely different and they have completely different functions. I'm not surprised that the people that loved Viking hated MSC and the more budget, lively cruise lines, but if you're someone who's used to cruising on Norwegian or Royal Caribbean and you took a cruise with Viking, you're probably going to find it very, very boring because it is much, much more relaxed. The target markets for these cruise lines are completely different, and they've just surveyed people who prefer luxurious cruise lines. It's also worth noting that the people that they surveyed were members of Which. I did subscribe to Which about 3 hours ago and it cost me £1, and I have already cancelled it because it's not the type of thing that I would subscribe to, so I don't think that many other people my age would be Which members. I think it will be very interesting to see who they actually surveyed for this, what kind of age they are, who they cruise with, because it's definitely not families, because MSC, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian are fantastic for families, possibly the best cruise lines for families. The cruise lines that won the best are Silversea and Saga are a 50+ cruise line, and Viking are an adult only cruise line, so they definitely didn't survey a family market at all. You might wonder why I'm talking about this, why I care, because I've seen people today say, oh no, I've booked with the worst cruise line, what have I done, what a mistake, but it really is just a load of rubbish. If you're a family or a young cruiser and you've booked with Norwegian or you've booked with Royal Caribbean, you're probably going to have a fantastic cruise. It's also worth noting that they didn't look at different cabin grades during this. They might be comparing one of the luxurious suites on Silversea to a guaranteed inside cabin on an old MSC cruise ship. There is no way to know, and they're completely different. They also only surveyed just over 2,000 passengers, which really is nothing. I do think it's very, very difficult to get an accurate representation of the cruise market because you can't just compare such vastly different things. I do think it's fair to compare things like the best cruise line for kids, and when it comes to the best cruise lines for kids, I would probably say Royal Caribbean and Norwegian and Marella, who aren't even in this survey. Cruise lines like MSC are really good for families, but I feel like that's fair to compare because they're similar prices and they're going for the same audience. To compare a family market to a luxurious market just makes no sense. What Which have basically done is they've made this chart, they've asked people questions and they've put stars on there which represent how many people are happy with that thing. I'm not sure how much I trust this though, because this says per night, okay, Viking cruises £400, I think that's fair, and it says MSC cruises £162. I'm not sure who's paying that price. I would pay probably about £100 for an MSC cruise per night, but I have done as little as £50 per night. So if you're talking £50 a night versus £400 a night, that's just ridiculous. This also says that Royal Caribbean are cheaper than MSC cruises, and I have never seen an MSC cruise that's more expensive than a Royal Caribbean cruise. I would say MSC are sometimes half the price of Royal Caribbean cruises, so I'm not really sure where they got this information from. I don't disagree with things on here in principle, so it says Cruise and Maritime have 2 out of 5 stars for their cabins, and Viking have 5 out of 5 stars for their cabins, and I'm sure the cabins on Viking cruise ships are much nicer than the ones on Cruise and Maritime, but that's not really the point. You're not comparing like for like, and it doesn't really make sense. So this says that MSC have a 57% satisfaction score amongst the people that voted in this survey. That doesn't really make sense when you look at MSC. They're the fastest growing cruise line by 1,000,000,000,000,000%. They're popping out cruise ships like it's nobody's business. No other cruise line is making cruise ships as fast as MSC. It just doesn't make any sense. I just don't understand it. Please let me know in the comments what you think are the best and worst cruise lines and what makes them best or worst. Because I think we can all agree that every person has a different thing that they want from cruising. Some people want it to be lively and exciting. Some people want it to be relaxing. Some people it's all about the food, some it's about the destinations. There's so much variety within the cruise industry, and that's what makes it fantastic, but you can't just compare all of these things together and decide that the most expensive one is the best. It doesn't make any sense. Really doesn't make any sense to me. Sorry for the rant. This isn't the type of video that I normally make, but it just really upsets me when a really good product like MSC, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean is getting named as the worst cruise line against a cruise line like Silversea. I'm sure Silversea are amazing, but it's just not the same thing. You can't compare these things. It makes no sense. I have used Which loads of times in the past. I think they're a great company. They just have some kind of strange data here, and it doesn't really represent what they're claiming that it represents. I don't think that in any way Which meant to be misleading by this. It does make sense that if you ask people who the best cruise line is, money no object, people are gonna say the most expensive cruise lines. That's not a shock. I just don't think that the results from this are in any way representative of the actual cruise market, and I disagree with it strongly. The whole thing that makes a cruise line good is different to different people. For me, a good cruise line is a cheap cruise line. I cannot afford to cruise on expensive, luxurious cruise lines. If it was only expensive, luxurious cruise lines that existed, I would have never been on a cruise. I love a cheap Costa Cruise, who aren't mentioned in this, MSC Cruise, Marella Cruise, Princess, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean. I love those cruise lines, and everybody has different things that they look for in a cruise. I don't think it's in any way realistic to compare them. For me, price is possibly the most important thing when I consider a cruise, so if I was to decide on the best cruise line, would I just put the cheapest? I don't know. It's a difficult balance between what's included and what you get for the money. One cruise line that did quite badly in this were P&O Cruises, and one of the things that people complained about was the fact that internet cost money on P&O Cruises. Internet costs money on almost all cruise lines. Cruise lines like Viking can afford to include Wi-Fi because you're paying £400 a night. I would much prefer to go on a P&O cruise for £100 a night and pay £10 a day for the social package, which is what I did on my P&O cruise, compared to spending £400 on a Viking cruise that includes Wi-Fi. You can't compare those two things. They're completely different. P&O are a family cruise line too, who are clearly not surveyed in this survey or represented at all, because all of the main cruise lines that came up in the top are adult-only cruise lines. I think we need to survey some kids for this one, some teenagers, some people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, maybe even into their 100s. My gran is 92 and she is still cruising, and she would probably vote for Cunard as her favourite cruise line. Cunard have got lost somewhere in the middle of this survey, so you know, everybody has a different thing. It's horses for courses or courses for horses, or however that phrase goes, it is that. Hudson, do you agree or disagree that MSC are the worst cruise line? You don't care, do you? No. Thank you for watching this. If you would like to know more about different cruise lines, I have a video coming out at the weekend which will take you through 20 of the biggest cruise lines from the UK, the USA and across Europe. That's a really good place to start if you are a new cruiser. But that's it from me this time. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Pretty please do subscribe. It makes a massive difference to me. And goodbye now.